Lots of people have lots of ideas about who and what Tom Bombadil is. But who and what aren't the questions I want to tackle today. Instead, I want to engage with the why of Tom Bombadil. Why did Tolkien put him into his story? What's his purpose in the narrative? How is The Lord of the Rings improved by him being in it? Maya, Govan and Melanine, and welcome to another episode of Tolkien Untangled. Now, I guess there are a few short and simple answers to this question. One could claim Tom Bombadil exists in the story to give the hobbits their barrow blades, so Merry can use his to stab the Witch King at Pelennor Fields, or he exists in the story to expand the depth of the world building, or he exists in the story to demonstrate the strangeness of Middle-earth's enigmas. And all of these are totally true and valid explanations, but I do want to dive a little deeper than just his plot relevance. Before I begin though, I will mention from an out-of-universe perspective, as a boy, Tolkien's second son, Michael Tolkien, once owned a brightly dressed Dutch doll with a feather in its hat called Tom Bombadil. Michael's older brother, John Tolkien, apparently didn't like the doll very much, and one day he stuffed it down the toilet. Fortunately for Michael, the doll was saved, and the boy's father, J.R.R. Tolkien, seemed to develop quite a fondness for it. He made up stories for his children about a jolly Tom Bombadil who lived in a mythical version of prehistoric Britain. And in 1934, the first of these Tom Bombadil poems was published in the Oxford magazine. Interestingly, the plot of that first poem involves Tom Bombadil falling into water and getting his feathered hat soaking wet, not unlike the doll that John stuffed into the lavatory. Also, in that first poem, we meet Goldberry, the River Woman's daughter. We meet Old Man Willow, and we see the River Withywindle running through an old forest. This isn't the point that I'm trying to make here, but one could argue the why of Tom Bombadil, from like a real-world perspective, is because Tolkien wanted to include this fun reference for his children. Tom Bombadil is, in fact, a lot older than The Lord of the Rings. People were reading about him and Goldberry and Old Man Willow years before the world knew who even Gandalf or Bilbo Baggins were. Anyway, getting back into Middle-earth, I know some people don't really like the Tom Bombadil chapters in Lord of the Rings and might even argue they add nothing to the story. I've even seen it suggested the narrative would be improved without them. But let me explain why I so passionately disagree. Why, in my opinion, Tom really does enhance the beauty of the story being told. And in order to do that, we are going to have to start with my favourite character ever to exist anywhere in all of fiction, Frodo Baggins, as J.R.R. Tolkien wrote him. So, on the 22nd of September, in the year 3018 of the Third Age, Frodo celebrates his 50th birthday in Bag End. He also celebrates Bilbo's 128th birthday, though he has no idea where Bilbo is. The last time they saw each other was at the long-expected party 17 years ago. The next day, when it becomes clear he can wait no longer for Gandalf to join them, Frodo leaves Bag End at nightfall with his friend and distant relative Pippin and his gardener, Sam, and he takes his very first steps on the quest that will ultimately lead him to the Crack of Doom. The next day, less than 24 hours in, the three hobbits have their first encounter with a Black Rider. They hide. The ringwraith stops and sniffs the air. Frodo feels an overwhelming urge to put on the ring, but luckily the rider departs before he does so. A few hours later, in the night, they encounter the Black Rider again. This time, it's even more frightening. The rider dismounts. Frodo feels an even stronger desire to put on the ring. The wraith sways from side to side, snuffling. Then it bends down and starts to crawl towards them. Frodo's hand goes into his pocket, groping for the ring, but before disaster can strike, the hobbits and the rider hear the sound of elvish singing. The rider returns to his horse and flees. The quest only makes it to day 2 because of Frodo's intuition to get off the road and the arrival of friendly elves. The rest of the night the hobbits spend with Gildor in Inglorion and his wandering company. It's a great scene. But in the morning, the elves are gone and the 3 hobbits must continue on their own. That day, they arrive at Bam Furlong and enjoy a hearty meal with the unbelievably badass Farmer Maggot. He tells them that only a few hours earlier, he too encountered a black rider asking for a hobbit called Baggins. Farmer Maggot showed his epic quality by telling the ringwraith to go back where he belongs, but once again this really shakes the hobbits. They haven't even left the Shire yet. This is only the 2nd full day of their quest, but once again, they've barely escaped catastrophe by the skin of their teeth. If they'd been a few hours earlier, or if the wraith had been a few hours later, all might have been lost already. That night, it is quiet, misty, and cold. Farmer Maggot drives the hobbits to the Buckleberry Ferry, but he doesn't dare light any lanterns. The fog grows thicker. Suddenly, they once again hear the clip-clop of an approaching rider. The hobbits hide, fearing the worst, and as the rider emerges from the mist, he tells Farmer Maggot in a muffled voice that he is looking for a Mr. Baggins. But when the stranger on the road draws near enough to be seen clearly, he is revealed not to be a Nazgul, but instead Merry Haddock Brandybuck, come looking for his friends who he fears may have gotten lost in the fog. Eventually, the hobbits bid farewell to Farmer Maggot, they cross the River Brandywine and enter Buckland, the small sliver of land, effectively a tiny independent country, between the Shire and the untamed wild beyond it. On the 2nd night after leaving Bag End, Frodo is back in a comfortable bed in his new home of Crick Hollow. But he knows he cannot stay. And he knows that as spooky as the past few days have been, the journey is only going to get a lot more dangerous as they leave Hobbit country behind them and face the perils of the Old Forest. During their night in Crick Hollow, Frodo reveals to his friends the true nature of his quest. And they reveal to him that they already know. They've been paying a lot more attention than he gives them credit for, and they insist on going with him. All except for one of them. Just before Frodo, Sam, and Pippin departed Bag End, Merry and another friend called Fredegar Bolger drove to Crick Hollow on a wagon with some of Frodo's belongings. But when Frodo announces that in the morning he's going to be venturing into the wilds of the Old Forest, Fredegar looks terrified. He says, "You can't be thinking of doing that. It's quite as dangerous as Black Riders. You'll get lost. People don't go in there. I am more afraid of the Old Forest than anything I know about. The stories about it are a nightmare." He opts to stay behind and remain in Crick Hollow, pretending to be Mr. Baggins and maintaining Frodo's ruse that he's moved to Buckland rather than gone off on some all-important quest. That night, Frodo has uneasy dreams. First, he sees tangled trees, then dark creatures crawling and snuffling towards him, and he feels certain dread that they will smell him out and find him. But then he hears a sound that he's never heard before, at least never in waking life. He hears the sound of the sea. Far off, he smells salt in the air. He feels a great desire to look upon it, but then suddenly there comes a flash in the sky and a roar of thunder, and he wakes suddenly. An hour and a half later, Frodo, Sam, Pippin, and Merry all bid farewell to Fredegar. They walk through a tunnel, they open a gate, and then they step inside the Old Forest. As the iron gate ominously clangs shut behind them, Merry tells Frodo, "There, you have left the Shire." You might be thinking, why on earth are you talking about this? It's supposed to be a video about Tom Bombadil, and it is. Bear with me, I'll get to him in just a couple of minutes, but I want to make sure I have first laid the groundwork of what exactly the four hobbits are feeling when that happens. As they leave the gate behind them, Frodo begins the third full day of his quest, his first day in the wild. And as they walk forward, Merry explains to them why Fredegar was so afraid of this ancient forest. He tells them about the anger of the trees and the ill will they feel towards the hobbits who cut them down and burned hundreds of their kin many years ago. Before long, the day turns from uneasy to straight up unpleasant. They feel they're being watched. The air is stuffy, the forest hot, and the path ever shifting. The trees are dictating their route, and soon all four hobbits are quite depressed. They head downhill into the Withywindle Valley, which is not the direction they want to be going in, but it is the only path that's available. The undergrowth gets ever thicker, the afternoon ever hotter, and the hobbits soon find themselves unusually weary, almost supernaturally so. After a couple more hours, they have lost all sense of direction, save that the trees seem to be leading them into the very heart of the forest. Until, eventually, they stumble across a river, the Withywindle, the same water Tom Bombadil fell into before meeting Goldberry and Old Man Willow in that much older poem from before even The Hobbit was published. Although, of course, back then, Tolkien had no idea that this river would one day become part of Middle-earth. As they approach it, the hobbits feel hotter and hotter. Flies buzz about them. The afternoon sun burns their backs, and each step becomes more reluctant than the last. Sleepiness seems to creep out of the ground and fall from the air around them. Eventually, Pippin falls forward. Merry says they must take a nap. Frodo resists the urge, but Sam yawns and blinks beside him. Merry and Pippin find a huge old willow tree, and under its sprawling branches they lie down and shut their eyes. A spell of sleep overpowers them. Frodo tries to resist it. He feels a compulsion to drink from the cool river water, but as he wets his feet in it, he too is overcome by drowsiness. Sam pulls himself together, and he sleepily goes to check on the ponies. Then he hears a splash. Frodo has been thrown into the water by the willow tree. Sam hastily pulls Frodo out. Frodo sputters and thanks him, and then they both realize Pippin has vanished, and all that can be seen of Merry are his legs. The roots of the willow tree have swallowed them and trapped them. Frodo instantly regrets entering this dreadful forest. He and Sam use a hatchet to try and save their friends, and when that doesn't work, they light a fire. All this achieves is angering the old willow. The situation seems entirely hopeless. Merry is almost ripped in half by the furious tree, and Frodo, without any idea what he's actually hoping for, cries out feebly for help. A moment later, there comes an answer, careless and happy. From among the trees, Frodo hears a deep voice singing absolute nonsense. Hey doll, merry doll, ring-a-dong-dillo, Tom-bom jolly Tom, Tom Bombadillo. Frodo and Sam stand enchanted as this bizarre figure comes bounding towards them. Bombadil asks what's wrong, and when they explain their desperate situation, he sets down the white water lilies he's been carrying. He approaches the willow and sings it a song. He says to the tree, "What be you a-thinking of? You should not be waking. Eat earth, dig deep, drink water, go to sleep." Immediately, Old Man Willow relents, and Merry and Pippin are set free. The hobbits thank jolly Tom Bombadil, and he bursts out laughing. Then he invites them for supper. He tells them the table is laid and Goldberry is waiting. Tom picks up his water lilies, he sings another song, and he leads his new friends through the soporific forest. As twilight descends, the trees become menacing again, until suddenly they just sort of come to an end. The mist disappears, and as if they are entering a dream, the hobbits find themselves under starlight in a clearing nearing the house of Tom Bombadil. This whole episode is about as weird for them as it is for the reader. That evening, they share a meal with Tom and Goldberry, though they get very little in the way of answers from them. When Frodo asks Goldberry, "Fair lady, who is Tom Bombadil?" she responds simply, "He is." Or perhaps, "He is." They have a few interesting but unilluminating chats with their hosts, and then they are sent to sleep on soft mattresses under blankets of white wool. For the second night in a row, Frodo has a frightening dream. He sees an old man trapped atop a tower. He hears the crying of fell voices and the howling of many wolves. He sees an eagle bearing the old man away, and then he hears the sound of hooves galloping towards him from the east. He thinks of black riders and wakes suddenly, the sound of hooves still echoing in his mind. Meanwhile, Pippin dreams of creaking willows and their twig fingers scraping on walls. Merry dreams of gurgling water and of drowning in a dark, shoreless pool. Sam sleeps like a log. Anyway, the next day, day 4 of the quest, is, in my opinion, perhaps the most important day until March 25th, when the One Ring is destroyed and, the Dark Lord is overthrown. But it's also a day that I think quite a few readers skip over. The day that is spent entirely in the house of Tom Bombadil. That morning, all 4 hobbits awake together, and when they look out of the window, they find the forest is hidden by fog and the sky speaks of rain. The sun won't show her face all day, and so day 4 of the quest is rained off. Instead of braving the dangers of the Barrow Downs, they are free to eat and drink and be merry among friends. Before they've even finished breakfast, the rain begins. Goldberry sings a rain song as sweet as showers on dry hills, and she tells the tale of a river flowing down to the sea. The hobbits listen with delight, and Frodo, glad of heart, blesses the kindly weather that's delayed their departure. During their day off, the hobbits learn much from Old Tom about the surrounding forest, and the bubbling waterfalls, and the great Barrow Downs that lie beyond. All day, they listen to him talk, and they are filled with wonder. As night falls, the rain ends, and the sky is filled with the light of white stars. As the silence of the heavens surrounds them, Frodo asks Tom Bombadil, "Who are you?" Tom replies, in riddles. He says he is eldest. He says he was here before the rivers and the trees, and he remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. Which hits slightly differently when we consider that Tolkien was writing about Tom Bombadil before he wrote The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. He says lots of other things that are all very interesting to the question of what is Tom Bombadil, but aren't too relevant to the point of this video. What I think matters much more right now is what happens after dinner. After they've eaten, and Goldberry has sung many more songs, the hobbits sit with old Tom by the fireside. And now it's his turn to ask questions of Frodo. His questions are so cunning that Frodo soon finds himself revealing more about Bilbo and his own hopes and fears than he's ever even shared with Gandalf. And in the midst of one of his stories, Bombadil suddenly interrupts Frodo by saying, "Show me the precious ring." To Frodo's astonishment, he actually does so. He pulls the chain from his pocket, unfastens the ring, and hands it at once over to Tom. Tom holds it. It seems to grow bigger in his hand, and then, astoundingly, Tom puts it on. The hobbits gasp. Nothing happens. He doesn't disappear. He just laughs, takes it off, tosses it into the air, and then the ring itself vanishes in a flash. Frodo gives out a cry, Tom leans forward and hands it back, with a smile. For a moment, Frodo suspects there must be a trick. This isn't the same ring he was entrusted to protect. He waits for Tom to begin telling an absurd story about badgers, and then he slips the ring onto his own finger to test it. Instantly, Merry is startled. He stares blankly at Frodo's seemingly empty chair, and Frodo is relieved. He is invisible. This is indeed the One Ring. But as he stands up and creeps quietly towards the fireplace, Tom Bombadil glances towards him with a seeing look in his shining eyes, and he says, "Hey, come, Frodo there, where be you a-going? Take off your golden ring, your hand's more fair without it." For reasons that really seem to defy explanation, the ruling ring seems to have no effect whatsoever on Tom Bombadil. When Frodo does as he's told, Tom tells them, "The sun will shine tomorrow and there will be a glad morning. There will be no more reason to remain in his house, no more cause for delay." Now, Tolkien doesn't state this explicitly, but I would imagine, surely, in this moment, Frodo must have felt an overwhelming temptation. On the first day, his quest was almost scuppered by a Black Rider. He only made it to day 2 because of Gildor Inglorion's wandering company. On the second day, all would have been lost again if he had arrived at Farmer Maggot's house either a few hours earlier, or if Farmer Maggot hadn't been so uncooperative with the Nazgul. On the third day, his friends were very nearly killed by a tree. How could he not feel like he's out of his depth? How could he not feel that his quest is hopeless? At least Bilbo had 13 dwarves and a wizard to help him out. Frodo has nothing but 3 friends and an evil burden. And yet that burden doesn't trouble Tom. This evil thing that Gandalf fears so greatly, that the Nazgul seek so maliciously, that even Gildor Inglorion could not be trusted with knowledge of, is completely harmless on Bombadil's finger. Right here, on day 4 of his quest, Frodo discovers what appears to be a get-out-of-jail-free card. He could just give up. He could leave the ring with Tom. He could go back to Crick Hollow, and he could sleep in a feather bed night after night after night. It's much more appealing than the prospect of the Barrow Downs in the morning. Not to mention everything that's doomed to come after. Especially as he still has no idea where Gandalf is, or if he'll ever even show up again. Giving the ring to Tom and calling it a day might not be the quote-unquote right choice, and in later chapters it's confirmed this would not have been the right choice. Tom doesn't care enough about the ring to protect it. If it remained with him, Sauron would have won. But in this moment, it must have seemed the safest, easiest, and best option available. But that night, for the 3rd night in a row, Frodo has a memorable dream. A vision, really. He hears a song that seems to come like a pale light behind a grey rain curtain. But then the veil turns all to silver glass and is rolled back, and Frodo sees it. The white shore of a far green country under a swift sunrise. Next morning, he wakes and finds the day is green and golden. He enjoys breakfast with his friends, and he makes the decision to keep going, to brave the Barrow Downs, to face the dangers ahead, and to resist the temptations of turning back. Within 2 short paragraphs of waking from his dream, on day 5, Frodo departs the house of Tom Bombadil and sets off on the road that will take him to Mordor. Later that day, he does find himself in another sticky situation. All three of his friends are captured by Barrow-wights and put under their spell, and Frodo is left all alone. He's forced to harden his resolve, to take up a sword, and to overcome the evil in the Barrow. He does call upon Tom Bombadil for the very last time, and Tom does show up to get the hobbits out of the tomb that they've been trapped in, but not until Frodo has already shown his bravery and his loyalty and his quality. Old Tom then reunites the hobbits with their lost ponies, and he gives each of them a barrow blade, forged long ago by the Dunedain of Arnor, who fought long wars against the Witch King. This is of course the blade that Merry is going to use to cripple the Witch King at Pelennor Fields. But then Tom bids the hobbits farewell, and they never see him again. On day 6, they arrive in Bree, and on day 7 they depart with Aragorn as their guide. On day 12, Frodo is stabbed by the Witch King in the dale below Weathertop. On day 26, he arrives in Rivendell. On day 91, the Fellowship of the Ring sets out. On day 111, 11-1, Gandalf falls from the bridge of Khazad-dûm. On day 152, the Fellowship breaks and Frodo sets off with Sam as his only companion. On day 155, they meet Gollum. On day 161, they arrive at the Black Gate, and on day 163, they encounter Faramir. On day 167, Frodo and Sam climb the stair towards Shelob's lair, and they reminisce together about their happy day in the house of Tom Bombadil, lamenting that here, on the border of Mordor, he cannot now help them. On day 170, Sam rescues Frodo from the Tower of Cirith Ungol. On day 178, they leave the road and head south towards Mount Doom, beginning the final stretch of their quest. And on day 181, the ring falls into the crack of doom, and the quest is finally achieved. None of which would have happened if Frodo had chosen differently. On day 4, if he'd let his rainy day in the house of Tom Bombadil turn him aside from what he had to do. 403 days after leaving Bag End, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin finally find themselves once again on the borders of the Shire. Gandalf leaves them to go and visit, of all people, Tom Bombadil, and 3 days later, our Hobbit heroes scour the Shire of Saruman's spiteful influence, and with his death, the War of the Ring finally comes to an end. 177 days after that, on the 1-year anniversary of Aragorn's coronation in Gondor, Sam and Rosie Cotton are married in the Shire. Our hobbits enjoy many happy days, but after 154 of them on the 2-year anniversary of Weathertop, Frodo falls ill. 157 days after that, on the 2-year anniversary of Shelob's sting, he falls ill again. And 189 days after that, 2 days shy of the 3-year anniversary of leaving Bag End and beginning his quest, Frodo departs for the final time. He rides to the Grey Havens, and 8 days later, he boards the White Ship that will carry him west. The Third Age ends. Sam, Merry, and Pippin ride home together, but on a night of rain, far out at sea, Frodo smells a sweet fragrance on the air. He hears the sound of singing coming over the water, and then it seems to him, as in his dream, in the house of Tom Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turns all to silver glass. It is rolled back, and he beholds white shores, and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise. In my opinion, the purpose of Tom Bombadil, the reason why he exists in this story, among other things, the reason why that day in his house matters so much, isn't because of how it affects the plot or the world, but because of how it affects Frodo and his decision and his quest. On day 4, Frodo could have given up. He had the perfect opportunity to do so, but he didn't take it. He had a dream that could only have come true if he went forward instead of back, if he suffered and struggled and gave everything he had to save everyone in Middle-earth. That is why I think Tom Bombadil matters. That is why I think the chapter in his house is so important, why I think it shouldn't be skipped, despite being, really weird and whimsical and admittedly a little distracting. The questions of who and what is Tom Bombadil are destined to be forever, I think, unanswerable. But the question of why is not. In my opinion, he represents one of the most beautiful parts of Frodo's journey. The story is made so much richer, and the ending so much more powerful, because 1,102 days before Frodo sailed west and departed Middle-earth forever, he spent 1 day in the house of Tom Bombadil. Anyway, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to hit like and leave a comment and click subscribe to make sure you don't miss any future videos coming soon. You can also now support the channel on Patreon or on Ko-fi if you would like to, so follow the links in the description to those pages if you are at all interested. However, until next time, as always, my dear friends, much love. Stay groovy and Navair Melanin.